And konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. I'm your host, Rick the Barkeep, bringing you episode 187 here at the Tavern, presented by HeroTaku.com. So it's been a few weeks now since we had the 2000th episode of Super Sentai, and I didn't really say anything about it back then simply because, well, it was a good episode. And it's really hard to find a lot of things to say about good episodes than it is to say about bad episodes. Just a quick rundown. I thought it was great how they actually had it as a crossover, that they did bring in the Gokaiger, but it wasn't about the Gokaiger. It was actually about the Zyuohger. We learned about their history. It has their characters. It advances the story. It advances the plot. It leads us into the next story arc for the Zyuohger, which is the hunt for the cube whale. And really, the Gokaiger there didn't really seem to be, stealing the spotlight from them, even though they easily could. Overall, it was a good episode, and I really don't have many issues with it. Well, of course, other than the fact that uh, if we're talking about a celebration of Super Sentai, probably get a different team other than the Gokaiger in there would have been a better call, but that's, again, discussion for another time. Now, there is something about this episode that I do think needs addressing, and here's the thing. Since then, I have tried to address this with a few other people on some forums in person and try to articulate to them as best I could the issue that I had this episode. And frankly, I don't think they got it. And that's nothing against them. It's probably my fault for not explaining it better because ultimately the conversation would end up as it usually does. Rick, you're overthinking, overanalyzing, and nitpicking at it. Fair enough, I've been known to do that from time to time, but that's what I do, so you can't fault me for that. It's like faulting a bird for flying. Nevertheless, this is something I think that needs to really be addressed, that if we move forward with what we've been doing, it's just going to be chaos. It's just going to be a mess, and it's... Okay, here's what I'm talking about. Let me tell you guys exactly what I'm talking about. It's about the Gokaigers. I know, we've talked about them to death in Super Mega Force and discussions about themselves, but frankly, as good as Gokaiger was, it's also the most problematic of all the Sentai shows, not because of the show itself, but essentially its legacy. And what do I mean by that? Alright, when you think of Gokaiger, what's the immediate thing that pops into your head? It's not the swordsmanship of the Blue Ranger, it's not the sister of the Yellow Ranger, or the Pink Ranger being a princess, or the Red Ranger being a cocky pirate who had a friend named Bosco. You don't think of the character stuff, unfortunately, and that's good character stuff that they have. But the immediate thing that people always think about when thinking about this series is the Gokai Changes. Always comes up, is always a big deal. And every time a new series comes out, we always have to hear, when are they going to make Ranger keys for this season? Which I've been guilty of because I collect Ranger keys, and I've already pre-ordered the Ninja key set. Nevertheless, Gokai Changes seem to dominate the series, so much to the fact that they are doing Gokai Changes when it doesn't even make sense that they should be doing it. Now, we've covered this topic before. I think it was back in podcast 97 when I talked about how they were not the most powerful Sentai team of all time. But I think we need to reiterate some points, and with a little time going by, almost 100 videos since then, I think we need to bring this up again because, again, people are just not getting it here. Now, let me kind of explain what Gokaiger is. Gokaiger is a pirate Sentai. They are not the Sentai that changes into other superhero teams. I want to make that clear here. The whole conceit behind it is that you have 6 Rangers that have Ranger keys that they put into their morphers to become Gokaigers. And through an extraordinary event and the aid of Aka Red, who of course is, the personification of the spirits of the Red Rangers, made from a wish of peace or something of that regard, they were able to obtain the powers of the previous Rangers, forge them into compatible devices for their morphers, and thus transform into those Rangers. Now again, this whole process is problematic because, well, for example, they get the powers of Jaka, and Jaka are cyborgs, and yet they don't turn into cyborgs themselves. They just get their suits and weapons, which are not the fundamental place of their power. let me put it in context this way, because maybe this will make a little bit more sense. Imagine that it was the Zoo Rangers that had this ability. Because we know, what's their morphing device in Zoo Ranger? They have the Dino Buckler, which comes with the Dino Medal, which has their dinosaurs on it. Well, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that instead of turning into Ranger keys, that the powers from the 34 Super Sentai teams was turned into Dino Metal, and all the Zoo Ranger had to do was put in their Dino Buckler, and look, they've become past and future Ranger teams. That's essentially what it is. The powers of the Gokaiger are not the Ranger keys. They are not the 34 previous Sentai powers. They're typical pirate forms with guns and swords and the Trident for the 6th Ranger. That's it. That is what their power set is. So, and let me continue with this too. Let me again, I just want to make sure I clarify this to everybody. When Gokaiger ended, the end of the series was them returning all the Ranger key powers to all the previous 34 teams. Because they did not need them anymore, their business on Earth was done, they found the greatest treasure in the universe, which was necessary to get the Ranger keys to get the greatest treasure in the universe. I don't know why, but there you go. And so it was done, and they flew off, never to be seen again, but only having their pirate powers. Or so we thought. Now, this problem began in the Go Buster Gokaiger crossover film, because when the Gokaiger come back, inexplicably, they have Ranger keys again and are able to transform into past Sentai Ranger teams, and not only that, but transform their Megazords into past Megazords. Now, I kind of let this slide when it first came out because I really didn't think too deep about it. It's like, oh, Ranger changes, Ranger keys and all that kind of stuff. Whatever, it's fine. Moving on. But now that they've done it again, here, in Zyuohger, I have to call them out on their bullshit. Because this is what's really bothering me. What they are saying, and they explain this in the Go Buster movie crossover, and they explain it here as well, is that they don't have the Ranger key powers anymore from the other Sentai teams. So, how are they able to Gokai change? Well, they send Guy out to plead with all the other teams to ask them to borrow their powers. Seriously. That is what is indicated in the Go Buster Gokaiger movie, and that's exactly what he's doing in this 2000th episode, or excuse me, the 1999th episode, as he goes to the Tokuger children and asks them to borrow their Ranger powers. This is what frustrates me, folks, because this should not be happening. This should not be something that should be going on whenever the Gokaiger show up. Because again, they gave up their Ranger keys at the end of the series. They gave them up, whatever. Now it seems that every time they come back, we have to have a convoluted reason for them to have the Ranger keys. I will remind you, it was Aka Ranger using the abilities of all the 34 Sentai teams into a final atomic explosion to destroy all the invading Zangiak ships that stripped all the Sentai teams of their powers, and then they went off into space, somehow becoming forged in the shape of keys. Now, what they're telling us is all Guy has to do is go ask nicely, and they will give them their powers in the form of Ranger keys. That doesn't make any sense, folks. Why is Guy in the episode going to the Tokuger, who are children again, and begging them for their powers? First of all, we have to believe that Guy, who, yes, can make combination keys, we don't know how he does that, is able to take the Tokuger powers and forge them into keys for their use. We also have to think about the fact that instead of saying, hey, Tokuger, we have an issue here, can you come and help us? That doesn't seem to cross anybody's mind to go asking for help. Just, hey, can we borrow your powers? We'll give them back, we promise. And of course, when he gets the Tokuger powers, they only use one of them, and that's it. We see the Green Ranger, Tokyo Yongo, which happens to be my favorite, of course. Yeah, but why'd you get the other powers? And here's another implication as well with Guy traveling the world to get these powers. Now, if you actually watch the episode, they do go to a couple of Red Ranger powers and whatnot. And I really have to question this because I don't know all the Sentai teams. I haven't actually watched all of them because, well, not enough English subs out there. But there are three that stick out to me that I find rather peculiar. There is Red Flash from Flashman. Now, the implication there is that Guy had traveled to the Flash Star to ask him and the others for their powers. So I like this idea of Guy traveling across the galaxy to go get a single Ranger key, or just 5 of them. I don't know how much the tide is turned by 5 Flashman keys, but there you go, that's what he did. So he's wasting time and resources. Because remember, why the Gokaiger there in the first place? To get the Mark of the King, or whatever this special cube is called. It's not the Mark of the King, it's the Crest of the King or something like that. That's why the Gokaiger are on Earth in the first place, remember, is that they're looking for this artifact, and they feel the need to go get all the Ranger keys. So apparently they decide to stop off on the Flash planet on the way back and say, hey, we need your keys because we're going to go dig something up on Earth. Imagine that conversation to the Flashmen. It's like, yeah, we borrowed your powers before, we gave them back, but we're going to need them again. Well, why do you need our powers? Is there an invasion on Earth? Do you need our help? No, we're just going to go dig up some pirate treasure. And you need our keys? Yeah, to go get the treasure. I see. And you need the keys why? I mean, I just want to hear that conversation. We didn't even hear the entire conversation between the Tokyugers and Guy. Okay, and then, and that's another thing too. We never see it, but I'm going to assume that there is a 6th Ranger key for our Orange Ranger, for Akira. I wonder how Guy found him since, well, he's invisible to people who don't have a lot of imagination. And don't you tell me the Guy has a lot of imagination simply because you're telling me he can't see Black Condor as a ghost, but he can see the former Shadowline member work in the rail yards. Yeah, I'd like you to explain that. Sure, he may have just gotten the 5 Ranger keys, but why wouldn't he get the 6th key? He's getting all these useless keys for everything. They didn't need Tokyo Gogo's key, but they got it anyway because, well, you need them all. Gotta catch them all. But also consider that they are using Gosei Red's powers. Now, we did last see Gosei Red in the Sentai 199 movie, of course, but where does Gosei Red live? Oh yes, Gosei World, another dimension where humans live. And the only way to get there was by the Tower of Heaven, which was destroyed at the beginning of Gokaiger, but was rebuilt. And what was Gosei Red's job, or what was everybody's kind of job when they were on Earth training? Well, part of it was to protect the Tower to Heaven, okay? And anytime that they revealed themselves as Gosei angels, they had to wipe their minds. So the question is how did Guy find him in the first place? I doubt he's on Earth, and how did he find Gosei World? And don't say the Super Sentai address book, because at this point in continuity, Aka Red is dead. He does come up in those DVD specials, but the canonicity of those is questionable at this point. So he's got to go to a completely different world, dimension, whatever the Gosei world is exactly, to ask him for his key and get the keys from the others. And then, of course, I'd love the idea that they may be taking it from Gosei Knight, because without his powers, he becomes the little header and all he can do is fly. And then what's even more astonishing is they have the Tyranno Ranger key. And again, barring the crossover, where did we see Geki go after Zyuranger ended? That's right, he ascended to heaven. And I'm sure every time he comes back down to Earth, he goes right back up there, right? So, Guy, tell me please, how did you get to heaven? I would really like to know that. Because if you could easily get to heaven to get a Ranger key, then why don't you tell everybody else how to get there? I think that would solve a lot of problems. Because that's the implication there, folks, is that Guy knows the way to heaven, and he hasn't told anybody. I mean, that's an unfortunate implication right there, and that does bother me a lot. But again, you're telling me that in order to go and find a hidden treasure on Earth, you have to go to another planet, another dimension, and into the afterlife to get Ranger keys to go dig up a treasure. Oh, sure, it may be guarded and all that, but you're telling me that they can't use pirate powers? That they need to go get ABBA Ranger powers? They gotta get the powers of the Go Rangers? They have to get the powers of the Car Rangers? Yes, because we see Red Racer's powers in there. Didn't they point out that their powers were pointless at some point, or useless? The greater power of traffic safety was useless? I mean, come on, folks. I'm going into a lot of deep discussion about this simply because it doesn't make sense. Gokai Changes do not define the Gokaigers. Now, as a series, it is the characters that define it. The whole Gokai Change was a 35th anniversary spectacle that they were doing, which is fine for what they were doing. But you undermine all of that by having it in later seasons. Once again, this is a unique event in which the Rangers lost their powers and they got forged into keys. The reason it was done that way is so that it is unique what they're doing. I mean, if the Gokaiger were making their own keys to mimic the Ranger powers, that's one thing. I can accept that. That's something I could get on board with. That they thought they were useful and they want to make their own keys. They may not be as powerful as the real ones, but they're going to do it anyway. Okay, that's great. But when you go in there saying that they're going to the Rangers, begging them for their powers, getting the powers so they could do stupid, foolish stuff like go digging for treasure like this, because again, they're pirates, and then they use the powers and then they give them right back? I don't get that. I really don't. Why are we doing this? Why is it that every time the Gokaiger have to show up, they have to do a Gokai change? I don't get this. I mean, if they're popular characters, then let them be characters. Don't let them do all these changes and all this spectacle stuff. Let them be integral to the character plot. That's one of the issues I had with them actually having the Gokaiger in there, because if this was a celebration of Super Sentai, have the Go Ranger in there, have an earlier team, have somebody from the 70s in there. It seems the only reason they really did want the Gokaiger in here is because they wanted the Gokai Changes. My thought was, well, they're going for treasure, so of course, they're going to get the Gokaiger. But then I thought to myself, Gokaiger, what do? They look for precious, and I would assume that they would also know about this as well. And you could have those guys come in to scan it, and maybe they want to take it from the Zoolger because it's too powerful, it goes off the charts, it's too dangerous, and they can't let them have it, and that's where it comes in. But no, we have to we have to sell more Ranger keys, because that's what they're doing. They're making more Ranger keys, and in the 2000th edition set, maybe that's what the hell this is about. Maybe they're trying to sell more Ranger keys. It's a stupid reason to do it, because if you just make them, people are going to buy them anyway. I don't know why you have to advertise them. Seriously, why are you advertising something that people already want? It's like advertising water. Nobody needs a commercial for water. We're going to drink water anyway. What's the big deal? Maybe I'm getting cynical and thinking it's just for the merchandising, but I don't know, folks. It bugs me that every time we have a discussion about Gokaiger, it's about the Gokai Changes, and now we have this loophole where every time we want them to have Gokai Changes, despite the fact their story's over, they gave up the powers, they no longer need them, every time they come back, all they have to do is go ask people for their keys, they automatically get them, and there we are. So instead of doing the logical thing of, bringing them into the battle for help, or just not giving up their keys, because, what was the whole hesitation in the 199 movie about the Gokaiger wanting their keys back and looking at the Gokaiger being selfish for taking their powers and whatnot and stuff, and that's where all the animosity was coming from and stuff, but then they willingly gave them up to them for their journey, when, again, they could have logically just used the Ranger key, use their powers to help them out for the rest of the season, but no, we can't have anything logical like that. We just gotta give up Ranger keys because the space pirates asked us. So what this is basically saying is that, actually, here are a couple of things it's saying. First of all, it's saying that no Ranger power will ever be destroyed at the end of the season, or if it is, it can be easily rebuilt. Because here's what I think is going to happen by the time we get to the 45th, 50th anniversaries, whatever. We're going to bring the Gokaiger again. They're going to show up in later seasons for whatever reason if there's an anniversary special. Screw the Go Rangers, who are the very first team to ever show up. They're the ones that started it all, and it was their popularity that created all these other seasons. Screw them. We don't need them at all, because we want to have the flashy changing to other previous teams when you can just bring in the other damn teams. But no, we're not going to have Ranger powers destroyed because we need to make keys of them, and we need to have the Gokaiger show up for no reason to turn into these Rangers. I just don't get it. Can somebody please explain to me? Why is it we just can't have them show up and have their pirate powers? Why must they do Gokai changes? How many of you out there say, oh, I hope they do Gokai changes when they show up? No, that's not what they're there for. They're there to be characters. The suit is an afterthought. The Gokai change should be an afterthought as well when we're talking about the series, okay? Gokai Changes only exist between the first episode and the last episode of Gokaiger. After that, there should be no more Gokai Changes. They should not be able to go and ask them and get these keys. Because once again, unique event cannot be duplicated, but for the purposes of whatever the hell it is we're doing, we have to have the Gokai Changes again. And that's why people are saying that, again, they're the most powerful team, which I've already pointed out, they are not the most powerful team because they should not have them as part of their normal power set. The only thing the Gokaigers should have is the Gokai gun, the Gokai sword, the team cannon, and the sphere that's used by the 6th Ranger. They should have no Ranger keys to do anything else beyond that. They don't even have the ability to call up the other Zords. All they have is their 5 basic Zords, and the Silver Ranger can't even call his Zord because you needed the Time Fire key to do that in the first place. So you see the problem there, folks, is that they've limited themselves to what they can actually do. He can't even call Gold Mode anymore because he doesn't even have the Anchor key, which I will remind you is made up of all the 6th Ranger powers up to that point. So I know I keep going on and on and on, but I'm really trying to get people to understand that here is they should not be turning into other teams. That's something that should not be happening. And it happens, this happens in Power Rangers a couple times, especially when we got to like Forever Red and the Legendary War, is that you have teams that are showing up that should not be there because their powers were destroyed. Now, if you want to explore how they got their powers back and everything, that's great, that's fine, do it. But they choose not to. And in this, all we get is the explanation for it. Guy asked them and they gave him over. Again, not factoring in they has to go to other planets, dimensions, and the afterlife in order to get these keys. Does he have Rio and Melee's key? Because I would love to see Guy's Inferno. That would be a fun story to tell. How'd you get Melee's key? Didn't she descend to hell for all eternity? Yes, she did, and I went there to get it. You went to hell? Yes, I did, and don't ask me about it. I mean, come on, folks, really. I would love to see just a miniseries of Guy going to heaven, hell, and other planets and begging for Ranger keys and come up with the adversity there. I would love to see that. That would be great. But we're not going to get that because, you know what, that's unique, creative, and integral to plot details. But I digress. Okay, so I think I've gone on and on and on and on and on enough. So again, here's my ultimate point. Going forward, the Gokaiger, anytime they show up, I don't know why they'd be showing up anymore, but whatever. If they show up, they should no longer have access to Gokai Changes. They should only have access to the 6 basic keys that they have. If you want to have another Legendary War, or whatever they call it in Super Sentai, and have all the Rangers lose their powers and they need to be reforged as keys, okay, do it. It'll be contrived, but do it. But at least it would make sense, because then they say, we lost our powers again. Oh, let's call the Gokaiger. They can go find it. I mean, that's what Marvelous and Bosco and Aka Red did that entire time, so they have a good idea of what to do. I mean, that's sound logic as any, I suppose, but if you want to do a story, if you want to do a story about the Sentai teams losing their powers and struggling with it, let's explore that, but let's not go into this asinine detour of every time the Gokai show up, they have to do Gokai Changes. And again, if you wanted to have other teams in the special, why not just have them show up? At least when we actually had the Go Buster versus Killjoy crossover, we only got the main actor for Tyranno Ranger, Geki, and the other Rangers did show up in voice appearances. They didn't get them on screen, but they were able to do it. They got all the dinosaur teams united, because that's one of the unique features of the Super Sentai, is that they have helmets that cover their entire faces. So it's kind of like a comic book, and you can have anybody there as long as you don't show their face, basically. But they don't do that. Again, I honestly thought 2000th episode, hey, let's bring in the Go Rangers. Here's just 40 years and 2000 episodes. Let's go back to where it began. But no, we gotta come up with something that's even dumber, or something that is dumb, whatever. So, and again, in the episode, they even said that they returned their Ranger keys. Oh, you borrowed it for a day, and now you're going to give it back. I see how that is. It's nice to think that when you're the other Ranger teams, that all they need is their power and not you. Because you know what? If I was the leader of a Sentai team and I'd been through, hell and back trying to battle off demons or mutants or orgs or monsters or aliens, whatever the case may be, if I'd gone through all that and some little jerk comes to me and says, yeah, we just want to borrow your powers, we don't need you, old man, I would be pretty perturbed by that. And I wonder if that's something they may think about exploring in the future as far as biting them back, borrowing these Ranger keys, or maybe Marvelous will one day just up and steal the keys, and be rid of it. Who knows? Okay, again, I've gone on too far here. But do you guys get it? Honestly, do you get it? Does it make sense? Do you understand what I'm trying to go ahead and say? I hope you do, because again, it's just stupid everything they've been doing into for the Gokaiger since the last episode. Because frankly, if that was the last episode, if we never saw the Gokaiger again, I think we'd be satisfied. But no, we gotta get all this other crap, and it's just stupid. Okay, that I swear, this is all I have to say for now. So, into the episode, folks. So, let me know what you think. If you understand what I'm saying, if you still don't understand what I'm trying to say, comment, leave me a message below, or send an email to onyxtavern@gmail, and we can always discuss that further as well. Well, otherwise, I want to thank you guys for listening to me rant again. Have a good evening, and the tavern is now closed.